Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'm your host, Joe Abadi. On last week's episode, someone had a question regarding spokes, and I began to answer that question as best I could. Some of the information I gave about what types of spokes to buy, where to buy spokes, and what to look for was all very, very good information. Unfortunately, I don't think I did a very good job of showing you or displaying to you how to lace a wheel. It just isn't really possible on a show with a budget like this, which is really no budget at all. What I'm going to do after this episode is over is I'm going to post up a link to a person that I found on YouTube, and his name is D-Ray, I think it is, and he's from Arkansas. He's got a great accent. He does a great job of telling you how to lace and true a wheel. So after this is over, I'm going to post that link up for you so you can get a real good idea of how to really properly lace a wheel. As I said, the information I gave you, it was good, but I just don't think it was really enough to for me to feel that I gave you enough information. So after the episode's over, look for a link for that. We can talk more about that next week. Also, earlier this week, I want to mention something because, you know, I restore bikes, as you know, and I do order parts from different vendors. This week, I got some parts in from DC Plastic. This is one of them right here. It's a side panel. It's actually a pair for a 1975 Suzuki RM125. And in the past, you've heard people speak of DC Plastic, and sometimes going back, they said something about it having a pebbly grain or it was nice for race bike stuff. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm really impressed with this plastic that Tom Clairot has put out at DC Plastic. The quality of it is great. Although I haven't drilled it yet, I did put it up to the bike, and it looks like everything is going to fit just the way it should. So next time you need to get some plastic, maybe you want to give the guys at DC a call, see what they've got for your bike. And again, I'm really happy with the fit and finish of this item. Don't be afraid to give Tom and the guys a try. Also on our list tonight, eBay versus Facebook. I've had a couple of people ask me in the past week or so, or I've seen some things on Facebook where people have sold some things or they're purchasing things, and a lot of people ask, well, what's the difference at this point? Is Facebook still good? Is Facebook better, or are people using eBay? I really like Facebook at this point, and I'll tell you why. Although you may not have as broad an audience, you're dealing with people directly. You're dealing with friends from Facebook, people that you belong in the same group with. And if you have something to sell, if you know the price and you know the value of it, you can put it up there and sell it relatively easy. Just here to my right, there's a wheel for a 1975 Kawasaki KX125. I had the wheel dismantled. I was going to use it for another project, but it went in a different direction. I decided to put the wheel on Facebook. At first, I did think about putting it on eBay, but I didn't. I looked around, I looked on eBay, I saw what wheels were selling for, and I decided to put it on Facebook. I was asking $150 for it. 20 minutes later, Harry Mason from Australia sent me a message, I'll take the wheel. He PayPal'd me the money, including the shipping, which was sizable, and I was done with it. I am really leaning more toward Facebook these days when it comes to selling things. It's a little faster. If you have a fair price, people will respond right away, and you can get your money quickly and sell it to someone who's going to appreciate it, who you know you can be dealing with maybe in the future as well. Also, maybe when it comes to selling complete motorcycles, maybe Facebook isn't the place depending on the bike. A friend of mine from Facebook, her name is Tina Gowdy, had a 1981 Mako 490 for sale. And she had it listed on eBay for a little while. She did eventually wind up selling it there for $9,500. Sometimes a broader audience on a more expensive item, eBay may be the place to go. But I think for average parts, everyday things, rims, tires, handlebars, sprockets, things like that, you might want to stick with Facebook, put it out there, but here's the important thing about it. Make sure you put good quality pictures, make sure you give a good description, and be willing to answer questions. I did see one other thing that I can't seem to get out of my mind on Facebook, where someone had a 1974 Honda CR250 for sale last week. Really a pretty nice bike. The tank was really nice. I restored it. That's not important right now. Overall, the bike was really nice. The asking price was $8,000. When the seller went to put the ad up, I thought it was a little unusual. It's 1974 Honda. Show or go, everything's new. If you don't have $8,000, don't comment. In fact, send me, I'll only respond to private messages. A little passive aggressive there on the ad, and at that point, the guy took a real beating on Facebook from people who, well, I guess found his ad a little bit rude and a little too standoffish. So, get your ad ready, put it on there, be willing to answer questions. If it's a whole bike, you know what I like to see? Because a lot of people don't read, let's face it. They don't want to read the whole ad. They look at pictures and they want to make their decision from there. I like bullet points. New bars, new grips, new chain, recently serviced, new filter. Just make a nice list of bullet points with the highlights and get right down to it. Quality pictures, uncluttered, good description, fair price. I think Facebook's the way to go. Maybe not on more expensive bikes, but definitely on parts. I mean, I've had great success on Facebook selling a lot of things, and I've been selling stuff on eBay, Facebook, Craigslist, and different places for like 20 years. So that's my opinion on that. Now, throughout this broadcast, feel free to type in any questions you may have. Type in where you're from, how many times you've watched, whether you enjoyed it, what some things you might want to see in upcoming episodes. My lovely wife, Susie, who's here. Susie, say hello.
Hi.
Oh, yeah,
I'm waiting.
she's waiting for questions. So if you send her some questions, she'll get them over to me, and I'll be able to answer them, hopefully throughout this broadcast. If not, we'll get into it a little bit more next week, and I'll be able to answer your questions there. Also, on the Facebook sales thing, I really like to use PayPal. So you might want to put that in your ad, PayPal only. This way you can get paid quickly. There's a little bit more of a sense of comfort that the person's a real buyer, that they're serious, and they're not waiting to send you a check or a money order, so you don't have to go back and forth with things like that. Our Legends and Heroes Spotlight tonight. If you're familiar with Legends and Heroes, they're all the supercrosses, all the motocross events. Alex and Carol Moros, very wonderful people, friends of mine for a long time, always have a great display at all the big races. In the Legends and Heroes Spotlight tonight, I want to talk about a company called Plastic Renovations. It's owned by a friend of mine. His name is Phil Cox. Phil has done an absolutely magnificent job as he's progressed with repairing and restoring plastic on vintage motorcycles. He's more of an Instagram user than he is a Facebook user, but he does have a Facebook page as well. Phil's work is second to none, and I find his service, especially at this point in vintage motocross and in restorations, to be invaluable. Number one, if you've ever polished plastic or tried to, it's not as easy as it looks. It's a very, very painstaking process of sanding, sometimes from only 180 or 220 grit all the way up to 1500, 2000. It can mean hours of standing under a sink and wet sanding a gas tank, a fender, a side panel. But even after you get done with that, there's still polishing involved. You can't go too fast. You can't use too big a wheel. You can't use too aggressive a compound. You have to be very careful. Why I think this is a great service at this point, especially in the restoration business, is that so many of us, me included, early on, took our fenders, put them in a recycle can. We didn't think there was any way that anybody would spend that time or come up with a process to polish plastic and bring it back to life the way Phil Cox is doing over at Plastic Renovations. The man is just a marvel at this, and if you go to his page, you'll see some of his work. Now, I'm going to say something here that, well, it's not contrary to me telling you to go to Phil, but you can go on YouTube. You can see people restoring plastic and how they do it. It's, as I said, a painstaking process. And what Phil does, and I know he's got some secrets he's not even sharing with me, he brings stuff back to factory, maybe even a little bit nicer than factory. And on a restoration, when you see original plastic on bikes, it speaks volumes. Because we all know, just like that set of side panels I pointed to earlier from the 75 RM 125, you can't find NOS plastic that easily anymore. And when you do, it's not uncommon for people to ask hundreds of dollars, several hundred, for just a side panel. Recently, I've seen Elsinore side panels. People have no problem asking $500 or $600. There was a 83 or 84 Kawasaki KX 125 or 250 rear fender with the integrated panel. A lot of people don't like them. I always thought it was really cool. There's one on eBay right now. The guy's in Australia. I think he's asking like $1,300 for the fender, which is like $1,100 US. Look, the guy could be out of his mind, but he's entitled to ask anything he wants. What I'm saying is that Phil Cox has a system, has an unbelievable way of bringing that plastic back to life. Check out Phil, check out what he does, and if you've got a bike that you're restoring that you've got the original plastic, but it's looking a little tired, a little faded, I've even seen him do some things with plastic that's cracked, okay? He has like a plastic welding process that he does. It's undetectable when he's done. He's brilliant. Look up Phil Cox, look up Plastic Renovations. Phil, thanks for helping me out, spreading the word a little bit about Vintage Motocross Q&A. I appreciate the post you've made. And again, check out Phil's page. Tell us where you're from. Get those questions rolling in too. This way we can have some dialogue throughout the program. I can approach some things with you. And if I can't answer them here, I'd be happy to investigate some things like I've done last week for some of the questions from last week that I'm going to address this week and give you some information on those things.
Excuse me, Mark Hildebrand.
Mark Hildebrand?
Mr. Nightmare.
Yes.
Says OhioVintageMotocross.com is Tad Estwep.
Estep. Yeah, I'm gonna get into the Tad Estep thing in a minute.
Web for Kawasaki KX400 rod kits.
Yeah, I've got it.
Is it E-Steps or Estep?
Estep. E-S-T-E-P.
Oh, okay.
Why are you interrupting my show here? I got the information right here. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
because Mark.
Yeah, I got it right here. Don't listen to Mark Hildebrand, whatever.
Well,
I'm only kidding, Mark. I love you, and that really is good information. I'm about to get into that. The question that somebody had last week. It was Clinton McDonald, actually. So I'm going to get into that in just a minute. But before I get into the Clinton McDonald question and give him an answer, I want to speak about questions we got from Chris Coleman and Jack Henry Lee. Last week, Jack and Chris both asked about plating steel cylinders, steel bore cylinders. And I did a little research on it. And in answer to your question, yes, it can be done. But I went a little bit further. I called Harry Clem. Harry Clem, to me, one of the most knowledgeable people in the world when it comes to two-stroke motors. He's had bikes at Bonneville Salt Flat that have held records for a very, very long time. Very, very, very talented guy from way back in the DG days. Here's a picture of Harry and I in the Boley Private Library in Tustin, California. I'm not sure what we're talking about there, but Harry is just a wealth of knowledge, and I always feel better after speaking to him. So I had Harry on the phone today. Harry tells me without question it can be done. But when you chrome a steel bore, you're going to add about 5 thousandths with the chrome to the inside of the cylinder. For a trail rider, for an average racer, for a guy just riding around, it's not going to be a problem. There will be a small problem with heat being dispersed once you chrome it, but it would be negligible unless you were really riding like a vintage flat track bike or a vintage road racer. So yes, it can be done. I mentioned some places last week about who would do this. Millennium is one, US Chrome is another. I would advise that you send your piston in when you have that process done. So, it can be done. You need to look for rings. This is something very, very important to think about before you decide whether you're going to have your cylinder chromed, Nickel, or NiCad. With a chrome bore, you want to run a cast iron ring. Make sure you can get cast iron rings for the bike that you have if you're going with that chrome bore. If you're going to use NiCad, which there is a difference, Millennium told me, US Chrome told me the same thing. You can run a chrome ring, or you can run a cast iron ring in that. That's how durable it is. So before you decide that you want to go with your steel liner with a chrome bore or a Nickel bore, make sure you can get the rings that go with that application? The answer is yes. It can be done. Clinton McDonald. Clinton McDonald last week asked us about a KX400 rod kit. I did a little research, and our buddy Mark Hildebrand did help me out with that. The guy you want to look for is Tad Estep, okay? Tad's been around a long time, but he's not on Facebook. You'll be able to find him probably on Mark's Vintage Swap Meet page on the internet. Not Facebook, not Instagram. Tab is out there, and he does make either the rod kit or he does make the spacer plate where you can use a KX 500 piston in your standard bore KX 400 cylinder. He makes the spacer plate. You'll need 2 gaskets, of course, but he does make it, and I'm sure he makes it to the right size. Doesn't affect the port timing, doesn't affect the stroke. I also had another idea, and if you can't get in touch with Tab, you might want to consider this. Get yourself some new gaskets, find somebody with a water jet or a really good machinist, bring them the gaskets, and tell them that you need a plate made the same size as that gasket. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how thick that plate is going to need to be. You may have to do some research on that. But if you get a hold of Tab, he's going to have the plate. He'll be able to tell you where to get the piston. He'll be able to put you in business. Thanks for that question, Clinton. I hope I was able to help you out. I hope you're enjoying the broadcast tonight. There was another question as well. Came from our friend Greg Hendrick. He wanted to know about fork springs. There were 2 places that I found that make custom fork springs for vintage bikes. Reactive Suspension and Icon Shocks. They're right here. Reactive Suspension, Icon Shocks. Go to their websites. You'll find them if you Google them, and you'll be able to get yourself some custom-made springs for your vintage scooter there. So once again, thank you for that question, Greg. I hope you found the answer informative. If you've got some questions coming in, it looks like Susie's busy.
Marky Mark says Millennium does factory Kawasaki works bikes. Millennium?
Millennium does some of Mark's factory bikes. So, I mean, if they're good enough for a works bike from Mark Hildebrand, some very, very valuable, very rare bikes, I would certainly put my faith in them to do your Honda, Suzuki, whatever it might be, and you can get exactly what you're looking for when it comes to a good solid chrome bore. We've got some questions here? Or we've just got some...
one. It's an interesting question, too.
Okay.
Adrian.
But Rob Cochran's watching. Rob, Ken Kibbe. Mark Hildebrand, of course. Adrian Mulker watching up in Canada. Thank you. Phil Cox, thanks for joining us. Bob Sangrith. Jack Henry Lee, welcome. Adrian Mulker wants to know, how do you get started in a restoration?
How did you get started?
How did I get started in a restoration?
How did you get started? Not a...
I thought you meant how does anybody get started?
No.
How did I get started in restoration? Back in 1999, I bought a CZ, actually before that, and I started racing it and wanted to take it apart during that winter and kind of refresh the bike, not necessarily restore it. But I went to a few bike shows, and I began to see what people were doing and realizing that my freshen up rebuild had nothing to do with restorations. But years before that, I had a little business where I bought and sold Corvettes. I didn't restore Corvettes, but I knew about painting. I knew about refinishing steel a little bit, chrome, painting things, and I had always been into dirt bikes. So I thought from that point that I would start dabbling, I can't even say restoring, to the level I do it at today. But I did what I thought was restoring bikes back in the early 2000s. How I really raised the bar for myself was I started a business called Cycle Therapy. And when I did that, in order to get some publicity, some press, I had purchased a couple of Harley-Davidson 250 MXs. And what I did was I restored both of them. And I decided to give one to Alex Moros, who was going to all the national events, all the armor races that year. And that bike I truly did restore. I checked more into how to do plating, researching different finishes, anodizing on rims, what types of spokes to use. It really took it up to a different level, and I was able to put that bike out there with Alex. He took it to all the nationals that year. We wound up raffling that bike off, giving half the money to ARMA. We also gave some support to American Classic Racing, a great club in the Northeast, and that's where I really began my restoration business. I went on to restore some other bikes, and then around, I guess it was 2002 or 2003, a friend of mine from New York State, his name is Eamon Massett, gave me my first paying restoration. It was a 74 CR250. And from there, I just kept going. And that's how I really got into the restoration business. I had a website, and things just progressed from there. And that's how I got into the restoration business. Any more questions?
No, Vasallo's on. Hi, Rich. Oh, it's Robbie. Sorry.
Oh, hey, Bobby Vasallo.
I thought it was Richie.
But you know, now that you mention it, I was talking to Rich Vasallo the other day, and we were kind of laughing about something that he showed me. It's a little tip I can give you. He showed me a while ago, and we were thinking about it, talking on the phone the other day, because he lives out in New Jersey. And we were talking about the time we had to get some grips put on a bike real quick at the track. Handlebars bent on my bike. I crashed, and I had to put grips on, and we got new bars or replaced them. And it was, how are we going to get the grips on now? How are we going to get them to stick real quick? We've got a race coming up. And Richie said to me, do you have a can of spray paint? And I don't know why, but in a big box, I had a can of black spray paint. So he takes some contact cleaner, he cleans off the bars, takes the spray paint, and sprays it inside the grip. Squeezes the grip a little bit, gets the paint all around inside that grip, puts it on the handlebar. It's like 5 minutes later, no wire, nothing. I cannot move the grip. It will not move. I raced that day, the grips were secure, it was all wonderful. We got off the track, of course. I wasn't really laughing about it. I was thanking him for this little tip that he had come up with. And he said to me, now when you go to take the grip off, he says, you pull up the end of the grip, shoot a little paint in there again, and then start to twist the grip gently. It'll come right off, you'll never damage the grip. You take a little contact cleaner or whatever you have, wipe the paint off the bar, and you could use them again. It worked like magic. Till this day, I still do it. Put a little paint inside that grip, make sure the bar's clean, push them back on, and you're in business. That's my tip from my buddy Richie Vasallo back in New Jersey. Do we have any more questions coming in?
Yeah.
Okay, what do we got?
We have Wes Seeley. Joe.
Wes Seeley.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah.
Who is a good source to replace chrome on forks? Says Mr. Seeley.
It's a place that I use, and it is called something Chrome and Grinding. They're on Santa Fe Springs Road in Bakersfield. Electronic Chrome and Grinding, I think is the name of it. When I get done with this broadcast, Wes, I'll get back inside, and if I don't do it tonight, in the next day or so, I'll make sure I find out who it is for you. They do a really, really good job. The last time I had them done, I think it cost me around $550 to have a pair re-chromed. But it's worth it. There's a disposal fee, there's a chemical fee, there's this fee, there's shipping. It'll run you like $600 by the time you're done. If somebody else who's watching here online tonight, watching this broadcast, if you know of a place, type it in there. Let Wes know where it may be. See, my feelings are, if I have to put something in a box to mail it to somebody, it doesn't really matter where I'm mailing it. If I'm in California, if I'm not going to drive 2 hours to have somebody do something for me, if I'm putting it in a box, it doesn't matter if I mail it to Chicago, Florida, or 2 hours from me in California. I want the best job, and I'd like it to come, especially in a situation like this, something this expensive, I'd like it to come in a recommendation from someone who has some experience with having something like that done. So, again, I'll get you the information that you need, and if somebody else can jump in there, I'm sure Wes would be real happy to hear who you can recommend for hard chroming. Remember, hard chroming, not decorative chrome, not chrome you see on handlebars or you might see other places on a bike. Hard chroming.
Dave Tice.
Dave Tice.
Polished cases and forks. How do I keep them clean and shiny? Clear coat with a question mark?
Well, if you're going to Cerakote them, then Cerakote leaves kind of I think more of a flat finish. But you're saying polished cases, how do I keep them shiny? Now, I don't know if you're talking about magnesium or aluminum. The only way to keep up with that is to keep up with it with compound and cleaning them after you use it. You could, after you polish them, you could put a clear coat over them. How long that's going to last on a race bike, I don't know. I'm also presuming that you're talking about a race bike. If you're just talking about a show bike, well, then you just got to keep up with it. There's a good product out there called Never Dull. It comes in a little can about this big, looks like a little tuna fish can, maybe a little bit bigger than that, and it's like cotton. And within that cotton, it's injected with a liquid, a compound, a polish. You just tear off a little piece, rub it around there, polish it with or buff it with a nice soft rag, and it'll bring the luster back to those polished cases. They're tough to keep up with. So with a harder aluminum like a rim or something like that, it's a little bit easier. But no matter what, any kind of aluminum that you're going to polish, you're going to have to keep up with, unless it gets coated in some way, like a lower fork leg for a motocross bike. A lot of guys like them polished, but the polish doesn't last too long. They're going back, they're chasing it after every couple of races, polishing it up again. What you could do is you could polish it, take it to a powder coater, have them clear powder coat it. Looks really nice. Is it going to chip? Yeah, eventually it's going to chip. Even down the road, it might yellow. I don't know, but it might be a long time before it does. So that's something to keep in mind when you're polishing aluminum and the upkeep on it. There are a lot of different products out there for polishing these days because polished aluminum has become so popular on hot rods, street bikes, and of course in the restoration world. In boats, a lot of guys have stainless. They polish stainless. So there's a lot of that going on. In fact, I came from a chromer today and I saw some things that were stainless steel that he had polished, and they looked just like chrome. They were stainless steel discs, actually, for the front of a motorcycle, a disc brake. They looked spectacular. So there are ways to polish them, and there are ways to maintain them.
Charles Brandy Raley says the Cerakote MC156 is very shiny and works great on aluminum, magnesium, and chrome.
Ah, well, see, I'm not real familiar or real well-schooled in Syracuse, not Syracuse, but Cerakote. So, with his name again was?
That's Charles Brandy Raley.
Charles Brandy Raley put in a great comment in the comment section and said what looks good when it comes to a nice polished look, and it can be done with Cerakote. So you might want to look into that. One of my buddies up here does Cerakoting. His name's Ryan Lester in Northern California. You might want to check into him. Or, again, look up Cerakote in your area. You may find someone that's doing it, and you can get it done to the way you like it. We got anybody else coming in with some questions?
No, I'm just commenting to Mark Hildebrand.
To Mark.
Retro Francis.
Retro Francis.
Don't let dirt and mud stay on polished aluminum. Clean as soon as possible after riding.
Yeah, I remember that. Norm. Retro Francis. His real name is Norm. Great guy. Built some amazing dune buggies. I mean, not just dune buggies every day. He's built some race cars for Tommy Croft and a few other guys. He's pretty amazing. He's Retro Francis on Facebook. Check out his page. But Norm is exactly correct. After you get done riding, there's sometimes things that keep dust down on tracks. I don't think they use calcium chloride anymore. They used to use that in some places. But there may be chemicals in dirt. There could be things when they water the track that's going to leave a stain. Also, stay away from things like Simple Green when you're washing a bike. that has raw aluminum on it. It has a tendency to stain if you don't take it off too quickly, or if it gets in an area that you can't get to wash it off very quickly. So be careful with that. Try and stick to a more of a mild detergent, soap detergent, things like that. Maybe just even plain water with soft brushes to get the mud, the goo, the gum, whatever you got on your bike after a day of riding, to get that stuff taken care of. Get it off your aluminum. Keep it easier to maintain.
Bob Sangrad.
Bob Sandgrand, yeah.
How do you handle bad stators on 73, 74 CR 250Ms? Rewind with a question mark?
Well,
Search for good news? Question mark.
off the top of my head, there used to be a guy called Tommy Stater, I think it was. And he used to rewind stators for bikes for guys that want to use the point system in their bike. For me, for my money, if I'm going to the races, I want my bike to be completely reliable. I'm going with some kind of pointless electronic system for that. PVL comes to mind. Vmxq, REMX, is now the PVL dealer who used to be in New England. They kind of dropped off the scene for a while, and I think Vmxq picked up the dealership from them, and they're offering some pointless electronic ignitions, PVLs, for different bikes. Check into that. Again, I'll post more information on that as I go through the questions later on. I'll put up some pictures, I'll put up some links if I can to get you the information that you need there.
I'm not sure what West Healy's asking. He says ceramic crank.
Ceramic.
Crank, BRNGS. I don't know that lingo. Is it like
Ceramic crank bearings
oh,
is what he's asking about.
see?
But I don't really know the question, Wes. Are you asking me what I think of them? I don't know.
Yeah, he says what you think.
I'll tell you. I'm looking at a set of bearings across my shop. They're right over there. I use a company called AB Bearing, or American Bearing. They're here in Northern California. The guy's name is Ken Sykes. I'll put up his information later on too. I like Ken Sykes. He picks up the phone when you call. You could send him pictures of your bearings, send him the measurements of them. He's a wealth of knowledge. If you use ceramic coated bearings, and I don't know if he handles that, I don't use them. I try and use as close to OEM stock stuff as I can, and I always turn to Ken Sykes when I need those bearings. Ken is also a wealth of knowledge on Greaves motorcycles. His father-in-law was Nicholson Motors, one of the first Greaves dealers in California. He knows a lot about Greaves. Very, very helpful guy. Ken Sykes. I'm going to put his information up a little bit later.
Oliver Perone.
Oliver Perone.
O-ring chains or non-O-ring chains?
Non-O-ring chains on 100cc and 125 bikes. There's just a little too much resistance, I think, on your vintage bikes, maybe even your Evo bikes in the 125s for an O-ring chain. I like to use a non-O-ring chain on those applications. For your more powerful bikes that are probably going to stretch a chain a little bit more, your more modern bikes, yeah, I'd go with an O-ring chain. In fact, now that we're even talking about chains a little bit, I can remember way back, when bikes like the 76YZ 125C came with a 428 pitch chain on it. Had an aluminum sprocket on the back. I remember having one as a kid. Didn't take long before the aluminum sprocket was completely worn out. I went to a dealer. It's a dish sprocket. 1976 or 77 this is. The dealer wants $75 for an aluminum sprocket. Over the counter, new part. At that time, start getting magazines, doing a little research. I see that FMF has a 520 kit. So I buy the 520 kit. It works great. New countershaft sprocket, new rear sprocket, 520 chain. Everybody's in business. In this day and age, you can get sprockets 428. You can get them replaced probably for less than an OEM sprocket back in 1976. I would recommend on your small bore bikes, 100cc, 125s, vintage bikes, run a 428. It's less restrictive, less drag on the chain, less drag on the engine. You might have to replace a sprocket a little more often, but we're not beating these bikes to death every weekend. We're vintage guys. We're out there having a good time. You're going to use the bike, what, 8, 10 times a year? Consider using a 428 chain. O-ring, heavier chain, bigger bore, more powerful bikes. Although I wouldn't use one on a vintage bike. Anybody else out there, Susie?
Nope.
Type in where you're listening to me from. Type in some questions or some ideas that.
Adrian Mulker says he's got a guy in Canada
Yeah.
who rewinds stators, does good work.
Adrian Mulker, thank you for the information. If you can type it in the comments, that would be great. Then everybody could see about the guy you have in Canada that rewinds. Go ahead.
He did.
Oh, great. If you want to still run points and things like that, and I get that if you do, maybe rewinding one could be less expensive than a PVL. I know they can get a little pricey, so there is an outlet for that in Canada. And who knows? Maybe even if you're in the States, to ship it to Canada could be less expensive than a PVL unit.
Ken Kaplan's watching.
Hey, Ken Kaplan.
And Wes Seeley says, okay, my question last week was, are you seeing issues with ethanol premix? I'm having a lot of seizures. Once I get customers on race gas, no issues.
Well, I think it was Mark Hildebrand who stated that you want to get non-ethanol gas. The place to get that is where a lot of people have boats, near lakes, near the ocean, things like that. I'm sure you can get non-ethanol gas in other places. VP, there's other race gases out there that you could use. I am not seeing that out here. I'm not hearing of that as being a problem. I also, when I ride, I make a mixture myself of the highest octane gas I can get at the pump with a race gas that I buy by the can. I mix 50-50 and I haven't had a problem. So, it could be a jetting issue, Wes, but I can't imagine more than one person having a jetting issue if you're having repetitious seizures on certain customers' bikes.
You got Jay Ashcroft from New York and Steve Lowlands from New Jersey.
They're watching Jay Ashcroft from New York, or he has a question?
No, they're just watching. How did I miss that?
Okay. Susie brought up a name just a few minutes ago, Ken Kaplan. Great guy. Talk about an enthusiast. If you get the time and you're in New England, you need to get to the New England Motorcycle Museum in Rockville. Go see Ken Kaplan, a super nice guy with a museum that is absolutely incredible. He has taken a factory that was dilapidated. It was a suit factory. In fact, it has such great history. All the president's suits prior to the 1960s, I believe, all the president's suits were made in this factory. The factory was dilapidated. It's all run down. Ken, in his infinite wisdom and his unbelievable strength, power, and desire to make a great museum, goes to the state, turns it into some kind of historic site, gets a grant, refinishes these buildings, and has filled them with some of the most amazing motorcycles you've ever seen. He's got a great collection of street bikes in there, off-road bikes, motocross, sidecars. I was there last summer. He had some Husqvarnas in there from the early 1900s. And he has events there throughout the months. All right, and I think he's got one coming up now, some kind of Oktoberfest thing. One time he had something with a battle of the bands. Another one he had some motorcycle stuntman there, a jump guy. Ken's always doing something to promote vintage motorcycling in all its forms. If you get a minute, go check out the page, New England Motorcycle Museum. Buy a shirt from Kenny. Support that cause. It's great. It's one of the only places up there that has anything to offer like that. I love what you do, Ken.
Jack Henry Lee.
Yes.
Joe, How do restorers repair or straighten broken or bent cylinder fins, especially on radial Makos?
Jack Henry Lee, how do you straighten bent cylinder fins on aluminum bikes like a Mako or so many of your cylinders? Most. Jack, I've done this. But I saw somebody else do it, and it was incredible. I'll tell you about the way that I did it. But I'm going to tell you about the way I saw someone else do it one time. It was absolutely amazing. This guy had some bent fins on a cylinder. I don't have a cylinder here right now. Doesn't really matter. But in fact, Jordan, can you reach for that cylinder behind you right there and hand it to me? Thank you. Cylinder, just like this. And the cylinder was bent down, and what the guy did was he took a cedar shake that you put on the roof. Cedar expands when you put water in it. He cut a wedge, he wedged it in that cylinder, and he put it in water, or he add water to it. You leave it a couple of days, and you can see how easy he would get that cedar shake out of the cylinder and how the fin came up. I saw him do this like 10 times. And eventually, the pressure from that cedar shake or cedar shingle pushed that fin back into shape. I've done it with wedges that I've made, aluminum wedges. Cut them out of a plate. I did it also with, I had some kind of steel wedges. I can't remember what they were for. But anyway, I put the wedge in there, or I would heat it up. I'd heat up the fin with a torch. I'd put the fin in, I'd put the wedge in there, tap it down gently, let it cool, walk away. Get a little bigger fin. Or I added some aluminum flashing or sheet metal, I think it was, but just enough, and I'd get it in gradually in bigger pieces. I'd go back the next day and I'd put another piece in, heat it up, tap it down, let it cool. This was not an extremely seriously bent fin, but you could see it, and on a restoration it would be noticeable. You can do it if you're making some kind of aluminum wedges. You have to heat it up with a torch, put the wedge in, tap it gently, walk away, let it cool. Take it out when it gets nice and cool, make a bigger wedge, put it in again. But the cedar shingle thing, it had me, I was baffled. And this fin was really, I mean, really bent. The guy did an amazing job. So
Then he got a leak in his roof.
I don't know if he had a leak in his roof or not, Sue. You know, I'm not sure he took the thing off his roof. He might have. I don't know. Maybe he did.
Tina Gowdy wants to know, how long can race gas sit in a vintage bike that is no longer being ridden? Can it do damage?
Yeah, I wouldn't leave gas of any kind, let alone race gas or any kind, Tina. I would take it out, drain it, and get it out. If you can, if you can, get it out of the carburetor too, because it's just going to gum everything up. Going to turn to, I don't know how long it's sitting, but I mean, I've seen gas tanks that have been sent to me where it's the fuel has literally just dried out and turned to varnish. It could take years. Don't panic. It's not like your gas that's been sitting in your tank for the last month is going to destroy the inside of your tank. I'm sure it hasn't. But given the opportunity, if you have the ability, take the gas out. That's always best. It's just like Wes Seeley was talking about earlier with the ethanol. Ethanol is doing things to gas tanks, to fiberglass, to plastics today that we're not sure what's going on. You know, it's like aspartame and Pepsi Cola. Nobody knows what this stuff is. They're putting chemicals and stuff, and people are putting it in there and leaving it, and it's wreaking havoc with everything.
There you Ken Kaplan, have you tried new Hoosier tires, Joe?
Have I tried who?
Hoosier tires.
Hoosier? Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy?
Eh,
No,
no.
I have not tried Hoosier tires. I haven't, Ken. If you have, and you want to type it in there, or are you a vendor for Hoosier tires now, Ken? Are you trying to like sneak one in on Joey? Doesn't matter. It's okay. No, I haven't used Hoosier tires. I do see them on the line at the Supercross. I do see them at the motocross on the modern bikes, which obviously they would be for modern bikes. I don't know if vintage guys are going to be into Hoosier tires. They might be if they're racing them. But no, I haven't tried them. I haven't tried them, Ken.
Charles Brandy Rayleigh,
Yep.
have you thought about having a guest each week via telephone and showing off their bike and letting them answer questions about the machine?
I have.
You could start with Mark Hildebrand.
I have thought about it. In fact, my friend and producer, Jordan Woodworth, who's here helping me today, we talked about doing some segments on that. Now, I live in Northern California. We'd all like to go out there to see Mark Hildebrand's amazing factory Kawasaki's. Not so easy to get in a plane, get out there and walk around with Mark on his bikes. It costs money for me to get there. I could do it in Northern California, and I do plan on doing it.
Mark could come here.
Mark did come here from when we shot the American Motocross Restoration pilot. Mark did drive a pickup truck out here with an amazing 1976 SR 125 on it. I hope I don't forget to stop breathing. He came out here with an SR 125 that was raced by Steve Wise and Mickey Kessler in the 1976 season. It was an amazing bike. We have it in the pilot. Mark talks about it. But yes, I do want to do some things like that in the near future where we could get the camera out of here, maybe get out on the road a little bit, or even outside the shop with a bike that somebody could bring by, or even one of my bikes, and I could point out some of the finer things about it. A phone call conversation, I am thinking about doing that. Right now, for this show, my phone is the camera. My wife's phone is how she gets me the questions. So we could do something maybe where we could use her phone. We can put up something to where we can give you the phone number. You can call in with your questions, or you send in pictures of the bike. We can bring it up on the screen, and we can have some dialogue about that. That's a really good idea, and I'm going to think about doing that in the future. Thank you for that suggestion.
Brett Heinz, thank you, Joe, for all that you do for the motocross restoration.
His name again, once?
Brett Heinz.
Brett Heinz.
Thank you, Joe, for all that you do for the motocross restoration world.
Well,
Very nice.
Brett, you're very, very welcome. And I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy sharing information. Some people were asking me one day, saying to me, why would you show anybody how to take the dents out of an Elsinore tank? Isn't that a trade secret? Is it a trade secret? No. We live in a pretty transparent society. I can go on YouTube and find out how David Blaine levitates himself. You can find out how people cut each other in half or cut a woman in half on a park bench on YouTube. Why wouldn't I share with you how I repair an Elsinore tank?
He's going to do that too.
Okay? So, I like sharing information, and without getting too philosophical and out there with everybody, we all have a spiritual gift. We all have a spiritual gift. My spiritual gift happens to be encouragement. I love telling people how to get things fixed. I love explaining to them how they can do it themselves. If they can't do it themselves, I love telling them where they can get it done, just like the Phil Cox segment with the plastic renovations. That's my spiritual gift. You have a spiritual gift too. You think about that. But you're welcome for all I try to do with Vintage Motocross. And I will continue to try and do, including putting this little show on every week and trying my best. And I get a lot of questions about it. Trying my best to get American Motocross Restoration on network television. Kevin Bridges is working on something right now, he tells me. Could be pretty big. I'm waiting for a call from him. He tells me it's coming in Wednesday. He says he's working on something. We've all had our hand in it. We've all worn different hats to get that show produced. Television has changed dramatically over the past couple of years. What you're watching right here is one of the reasons. There are young people on YouTube who are making tens of thousands of dollars a month showing you how to paint fingernails, showing you how to decorate, showing you all different things. Network television isn't quite what it used to be. Reality shows aren't quite what they used to be. It's going to be a struggle, but I think in the right time, American motocross restoration will see the light of day if I have anything to do with it. And if it doesn't, I'll be right here every week till I'm old and gray, helping everybody I can.
Amen. Sal Scarpa III.
Sal Scarpa III. Gumasinic.
Oh, I'm rebuilding a Kajiva.
Kajiva, yeah.
Vmxq 500, but can't find a correct rod. Closest I found is a 2 millimeter shorter C to C. Can I mill the bottom of the cylinder 2 millimeters without disrupting port timing?
No.
No,
No.
Sal.
Sal, you can't mill the bottom of your cylinder without changing the port timing on your Kajiva 500. I don't know if everyone heard Susie when she was asking the question, but Sal says he's having difficulty finding a rod for a Kajiva 500. He could find one 2 millimeters longer, but he was talking about, well, wait, you could find one 2 millimeters shorter is what you're telling me. Because why would you mill the bottom of the cylinder if you found a rod 2 millimeters longer? Either way, I don't think that that's something, you could do. Kajiva. I'm thinking like Harley 250, nah, there'd be a 250, it wouldn't be a 500 like a Kajiva. I'm going to snoop around a little bit for Kajiva parts. You've probably done it already, but I'm going to call a few guys that I know and see if they can point you in the right direction, Sal. If you would, so I have the information. Well, Susie just told me what the question was. So you've probably typed in what year the Kajiva 500 is. I'm going to do my best to find out.
No, he didn't.
Type it in, Sal. Type in the name of the bike. I know it's a Kajiva. Type in the size and the year, and I'll see if I can help you out. Next week, we'll get you up on one of these little clipboards, get your name on there, and hopefully get you the information that you need. Anybody else?
Tim Sullivan, speaking of museums, has there been any information on the museum in Chicago? Have found little information on it and would go.
Tim Sullivan?
Yeah.
Tim Sullivan. I talked about the Terry Good Museum a little bit last week. That is scheduled to open sometime in the Chicago area. You're watching this on Facebook. Terry Good is on Facebook. He's got mxworksbikes.com. He's got Suzuki Factory Works Bikes. He's got a couple of different pages on Facebook, including, I think, International Motocross Museum. Look him up on Facebook. It's on there somewhere. I know it is. You're obviously on Facebook. You'll find out more about that. We are all anxiously anticipating the opening of that museum.
Nikki Mimikos.
Nikki Mimikos. Stikanis, Mickey. I have to speak Greek. I have to speak Italian. I have to speak a lot of languages.
He's telling you that he loves you or he loves me.
Nikki,
I really love you. So
Nikki,
I don't know. He
thank
might
you.
be saying that to me. No?
Nikki's a good guy, Jersey guy. Former professional wrestler, Nikki Mimikos. I don't know if any of you guys remember Doink the Clown. Nikki Mimikos was Doink the Clown. Also, hell of a nice guy and a great motocross rider too. Fun guy to hang around with.
George Lucas says, found an RM100. Can anyone help deliver from Toronto to Auburn?
To Auburn?
Auburn, New York. From Toronto, Canada, to Auburn, New York.
George Lucas found a RM100 in Toronto, and he needs to get it to Auburn, New York. If anybody out there can help him, has any experience with getting bikes over the border, I know it can be a little delicate. Once you get to the border and you don't have a title or the proper paperwork, you could wind up getting stuck there. So, George, my advice would be, whoever you're buying the bike from, make sure they have that paperwork in order. Getting it over is one thing once you got the paperwork in order. You have no idea how badly I want to say something about border crossings right now, but I'm not gonna. But I'm not gonna do it.
No, don't do it.
It'd be tough to get a bike across. Let's just say that.
Don't do it.
What do we got?
We have photos and then take the Q&A, Charles?
Yeah, email me the photos and some information on the bike, and we'll see if we can't, get it incorporated onto the screen, and we can discuss that. I think that's a real good idea. No one has asked to do that yet. I'd be happy to do it with your bike. And down the road, if that catches on, maybe we can make a little segment of it every week.
James Sharp says, "Hi Joe, thanks for posting. I know I promised, but soon we'll share my way of plastic refinishing."
James Sharp, it's good to hear from you. We've been a little separated on Facebook for whatever reason. Blessings to you and your boys and your lovely girlfriend. You also do a great job on plastic polishing. In fact, a couple of years ago when we were doing these little Q&A segments, you were one of the first guys that jumped in, gave us some pictures, and told us how you did some plastic polishing. It's good to hear from you, James. I hope all is well. Anything else?
Mike Connolly, how long do you leave your rear tires of big horse bikes in the sun to harden them for longer life? I leave mine on the shed roof, but haven't figured out the optimum time. What is
Mike Conley.
Yeah.
Are you on any prescription medication, Mike? Here's what I want you to do. You know where I live. Why don't you come over tomorrow? We'll sit down. We'll have some herbal tea, breathing exercises, and we'll talk about the tire on the roof getting hard. I love you, Mike Conley. I'm not really sure about the question or if you're just pulling my leg. But I wouldn't mind seeing you. Let's get lunch or let's do something in the near future. Anybody else? I'm going to say this. If anybody else has a question, anybody else has any thoughts on the show, write them in the comment section below. I'll get to them this week, or I'll bring them into the program on our next episode. For right now, I want to thank everybody that tuned in. I'm really trying my best to make it a good show every week. What makes it good is your questions and you being here. So, until next Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, this is Joe Abadi. Thank you for joining us on Vintage Motocross Q&A.